Today's episode is brought to you by the Tax Defense Group. The team of professionals at the Tax Defense Group are passionate about helping taxpayers resolve their tax debt. Their services include basic tax preparation, tax audits, resolving large tax debts, and more. They actively represent taxpayers throughout the entire U.S. Call today at 800-850-7973 to get started. That number again is 800-850-7973, and you can visit them online at thetaxdefensegroup.com. We recently launched our website, ucaststudios.com, with articles about sports, special interest topics, and more. We have some cool stuff on our site. To read our content, please visit ucaststudios.com. Hi, welcome to the Great Western Podcast. This is Marcus, and I'm joined by Jonny Arnett with the Jonny Arnett YouTube channel. And today, instead of looking back at a historical game, we're going to be kind of doing a little bit of an experiment, or I guess a little bit of a hypothetical matchup between the all Lakers starting lineup versus what we're calling Team NBA all starting lineup. The ground rules that we kind of have going are basically Jonny and I, we've each chosen 5 Lakers starters with 5 bench players for the Lakers. And then the NBA team is basically the 5 players that represent all other franchises in the NBA that basically aren't the Lakers. And then 5 bench players from that. So basically, one thing that we want to do is no crossover between players that play for the Lakers and other franchises. So, for example, LeBron James, we can't have him on the NBA team for the years that he wasn't a Laker. It would just be his time at the Lakers. So he's only a Laker, and Shaq is only a Laker. And that even goes further for a player like a Karl Malone or Gary Payton as well. Yeah, I guess we can just kind of get started. So, do you want to go over the Lakers team first, I guess? Or who I was thinking about for it?
I'm really excited about this conversation because this should be a lot of fun, because I know a lot of people, they talk about NBA 2K and stuff has like their all-time greatest teams of all time. Everybody wants to argue about what would be the greatest team, but I think the consensus is like the Lakers got it. Like they're so deep in talent, but comparing them to the rest of the NBA, like these matchups and the talent that we each have, is going to be pretty fun and interesting. So I picked the all-time NBA team, and then you picked the all-time Lakers team. So we should establish that real quick. And I feel like mine would be pretty controversial because I left some pretty talented names off the team, but it's hard to pick just 10. But my all-time starting 5, I got immediately controversial pick. I got Steph Curry starting at the point guard. You have to take maybe like a specific year. I'm talking about the prime of their career. So I'm talking 50, 40, 90, unanimous MVP, 2016, 30 points per game, Steph Curry. That's what I'm talking about. 73-9, Steph Curry, completely healthy. He's my point guard because I just love the way he's going to stretch the floor. Michael Jordan, I'm taking him.
I just wanted to say real quick, too, like you raised a good point. With all these players, it's their best years.
Right.
So, like, best season. Like, so this is, definitely their best time. So whenever you hear these names, like it's like, oh, well, what year specifically? It's just imagine their best year.
Yeah, exactly. So Steph Curry, Michael Jordan at the 2-guard spot, obviously. Larry Bird, I've got a 3 spot. I actually mixed it up here and changed position, but he could play this position fantastically. Is Hakeem Olajuwon, moving him to the power forward spot to make room for Bill Russell at the 5. So I love that starting unit. Coming off the bench, I kind of just went like, we kind of just did like backup point guard, backup shooting guard, 3 guards, so on. And so backup point guard, Isaiah Thomas, move Scottie Pippen to the 2 to make room for Kevin Durant at the 3, Charles Barkley at the 4, Tim Duncan at the 5. And then the near misses, these great players, Oscar Robertson, Kevin Garnett, John Stockton, Kevin McHale, Dirk Nowitzki, Dwayne Wade, Allen Iverson, David Robinson, Dr. J, and Moses Malone. So it was tough to leave those guys out, but I am super happy with the team I've got on an all-NBA team. And go ahead and lay them out for the Lakers.
Okay, and so for these Lakers, just to be clear, this is their best years as Lakers. So there's going to be some players here that they had a better year somewhere else, but just their best years as Lakers. So the starting lineup I have is Magic, Kobe, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Shaq as the starters. And then off the bench, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, James Worthy, Pau Gasol, and Kareem. And I was thinking, I mean, obviously that's a lot of names already for the Lakers. So the list of, notable people that didn't make it, obviously that's Will Chamberlain, George Mikan, and Gail Goodrich. So I was thinking, I mean, you can obviously make an argument that there's definitely better players that have accomplished more than Anthony Davis for sure in that starting lineup. But I was kind of thinking like positionally, like I didn't want to necessarily have, Kareem and Shaq both in at the same time. So I was kind of thinking, okay, at least with this lineup, you'd have 4 people that can shoot threes. And especially, I don't know. I just kind of envisioned that it would just clog up the lane less if you had Davis instead of it being Kareem and Shaq next to each other. But yeah. So I mean, I guess going from here, how do you think they would match up with each other? How do you think some of these individual matchups would go? I mean, I don't know. I love that tandem of Kobe, Magic, and LeBron. I don't know. There's something I just think about the 3 of those dudes together at the court at one time together. I mean, man, I don't know. That would be an incredible sight to see.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that version of LeBron's like 2013 LeBron with like Miami. And him running down the wing with a fast break with Magic. I mean, that Lakers team could attack you in multiple ways because they could run the fast break and you got Magic in transition with Kobe and LeBron finishing. I mean, that is scary. And if you want to slow it down, you could run things through the post with, just feed Shaq down low or even get Anthony Davis some touches. I feel like Davis might have a hard time getting some touches with Kobe and LeBron shooting the ball and Shaq down low. But yeah, that would be a nice team, pretty big team too, with Magic being 6'9", Kobe 6'6", LeBron 6'9". AD, what is AD, like 6'11", and then you got Shaq 7'1". I mean, that is a huge starting 5.
Well, between these two teams, which team do you think has an individual matchup advantage over the other? Like, so for example, like where do you think the All NBA team or the NBA team has an advantage over the Lakers in terms of starting lineup, and vice versa for Lakers versus the NBA team?
Well, I think at the point guard spot, I think Steph Curry would have a really difficult time handling Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson, is a point guard and he likes to do a lot of facilitating, but he's got a big body. He's a tall player. And 6'9" Magic Johnson backing down, kind of, surveying the floor and looking for guys to find as he's backing down a small Steph Curry. I see a huge advantage for Magic there because I felt like that's kind of a hole in my All-NBA team, because coming off the bench is Isaiah Thomas, and I feel like, Magic can exploit that too because Isaiah's a small guy as well. But, so I feel like that's an advantage for the Lakers. As far as the All-NBA team, I have Hakeem at the power forward position, and all respect to Anthony Davis, he can't handle Hakeem Olajuwon. No one can handle Hakeem Olajuwon. If David Robinson gets lit up by Hakeem Olajuwon, so is Anthony Davis. Like, anybody's going to get lit up by Hakeem. So I feel like that's an area. I like my shooting. I really do like my shooting. Michael Jordan on the post, and you got Larry Bird and Steph Curry. I mean, 2 of the greatest three-point shooters of all time on the perimeter. I don't think your Lakers starting lineup quite has that. Mean in transition, and you can always just run things through Shaq down low. But I think in terms of shooting, we're going to be hitting more three-pointers.
Yeah, I kind of thought about that too, like kind of thinking about this historical Lakers team, and it's kind of, in a sense, I mean, it sounds weird. It might sound like, I mean, to certain people, it might sound a little bit paradoxical, but it's like the Lakers have some very great all-time scorers, but when it comes to all-time shooters, I mean, it's kind of weird. I feel like, I mean, who would you say in the history of the Lakers is the all-time greatest Lakers shooter?
Man, I don't even have an immediate answer that comes to mind. Shoot, I got to think about that. I mean, there was some good role players who were good shooters. Robert Horry, could shoot. He wasn't one of the best ones, but I mean, Derek Fisher, Rick Fox, Brian Shaw, they were all good shooters in the early 2000s and such. Michael Cooper was kind of the Showtime shooter, but Glenn Rice was really good in 2000 for the Lakers. But yeah, man, I mean, there's not like a clear-cut answer. I might just be completely spacing on someone, to be honest. But and then if you count Steve Nash as a 39, 40-year-old man, but at that point, if it was prime Steve Nash, then yeah, you'd probably give him that nod there. But as that old version of Nash, I don't think so. So yeah, I got to think about that one a little bit more. Maybe even Jerry West, to be honest. I mean, when he played, there wasn't really a 3-point line, but a lot of people say that like he could consistently hit the 3-point shot. A lot of his jumpers, if you just look at highlights and footage, were long perimeter jumpers anyway. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see him extend his range. So it's kind of weird saying a player, that far back, but yeah, it was really not a clear-cut answer for the Lakers. It's an interesting point.
Well, I think one thing that would be interesting, and I guess this kind of goes back to the rumor mill, but I remember probably March of 2019, I remember there were some rumors that said that, Klay Thompson would be interested in coming to the Lakers if they traded for Davis. And I mean, obviously Klay's been out this whole year, but could you imagine that lineup if the Lakers somehow had LeBron, Davis, and Klay Thompson right now? I mean, I feel like Klay may have actually made this all-time, especially as a bench player role, just like this guy that's just such a great shooter. But I guess that's a little bit of a what if. But yeah, I definitely agree with you there that your team has better 3-point shooters. I feel like with the all-time Lakers team, I just feel like the force of that, just I don't know, man, just the strength. Like, I mean, I actually kind of thought the biggest mismatch or the biggest advantage the Lakers might have had would have been Shaq against Bill Russell. I mean, I just kind of think, like, how is Bill Russell going to stop Shaq?
Well, if we're talking about prime Shaq. So you're taking 2000 Shaq, who should have been unanimous MVP. Nobody's stopping him. But I think if there's somebody who could slow him down, I don't know. I think Bill Russell is a good candidate for it. He's not as tall as Shaq, but he's strong, he's lean, he's 6'10", and I mean, Bill Russell spent all of his years playing against Wilt Chamberlain, having to slow him down all the time. And he did. He did successfully slow down Wilt Chamberlain. He didn't shut it down. Wilt Chamberlain still put up a lot of points against him, but it was significantly less than Wilt put up on everyone else. But he was one of the best defensive players, shot blockers of all time, an incredible leaper. They've talked about how his leaping ability was borderline Olympian status. Like, he was an incredible leaper. I think at one point they had said he was like he had registered like the 7th highest leap for like a specific year. I have to look into it, but his leaping ability was insane. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like he'd do decent, but yeah, you could probably still feed Shaq down low and he's still going to get you 25 and 12.
Well, I'm just thinking back about the Shaq, like you were talking about, like prime Shaq. I mean, the dude was just like unstoppable. I mean, he was just so physically strong and just, I mean, I don't know. I mean, other than maybe prime Wilt, they said was, maybe the strongest guy to ever play in the NBA. Like, I just think about Shaq and I just think like, man, how on earth are you going to stop this guy physically when he's also backed up by Davis, who's big and strong, and then LeBron, who's also just, you know what I mean? Like, how are you stopping all three of that strength? You know what I mean? Like,
actually, I gotta make a correction here because that would not be my strategy, this unit strategy, because I think the All NBA team, you'd have Hakeem at the power forward position, but defensively you'd probably switch. You'd have Bill Russell, 6'10" Bill Russell guarding 6'11" Anthony Davis. And then you'd have Hakeem Olajuwon on prime Shaq. Now, Hakeem would give Shaq the business back when he was with the Magic. And I think a big what if and an interesting what if that we never got to see was the Shaq who put on some weight prime with the Lakers how would he have done against prime Hakeem Olajuwon? So that becomes, I think, even a better and more appetizing matchup. I would love to see those two go head to head.
See, I know we talked about this in our last episode. Like, and I know there's kind of. I mean, I saw there was a basketball YouTuber. He made a video about it recently about Hakeem versus Shaq, and just with all due respect to the arguments made in that video, I just feel like I just would take prime Shaq over Hakeem. Like, you look at like their like the records they had in their career, like season like by season. I mean, Shaq had some incredible winning seasons, and I mean, when he went against Hakeem, wasn't that only like his fourth year in the league or something like that, or third year in the league? And Hakeem, by that point, he'd been around the block forever, and I don't know, man. I just think Shaq was a better all time player, and I mean, he obviously has the accolades, and I mean, that 3 year just dominant stretch. I don't know. I mean, I just think that he was just a better all time player, but I mean, that doesn't mean that Hakeem was a scrub. I don't know. I don't know. I'm just thinking this Shaq he was just so strong and just so, like, especially we were talking about like during that 3P. And that's another thing too. I also wanted to mention too. I definitely think I probably should have said this earlier, but the coaches, who might have the coaching edge, and obviously for the Lakers, I mean, if you want to go deep and say, okay, well, who's the coach, who's on the bench, like not only who's the head coach, but who are like the assistants. I mean, I definitely think the Lakers have the edge there, but I mean, I guess it's pretty obvious. It'd be Phil Jackson would be the coach for the Lakers, right?
Yeah, you gotta take Phil.
Do you want the assistants? Like, so would you have the assistants? Would you have Pat Riley? Would you want like to go deeper that way, or do you think we should just get the one guy?
Yeah, just the one guy, because it's hard to say. Like, I don't even know if those guys, like a lot of these guys, how they do as assistants. Like, sometimes you get guys who are so good at steering the ship that you make them have to play second fiddle. I don't know. I feel like I picture just Phil Jackson with his go-to, assistant coaches, with like Frank Hamlin and like Jim Clemens and stuff like that. I think that'd be the best way to go, just as like typical assistant coach supporting.
Who would you have? Who would you have for the NBA team?
There's been some great coaches. I think you could take a guy, like if you took a guy like Red Auerbach, I just feel like it's a little too far back for some of the modern players, and just the way the game's played now. The style has just changed a little too dramatically. And I do have some current players, or at least close to current players, like Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and even a more recent Tim Duncan in my lineup. So with guys like that and as much defense potential I've got on the floor, and even some spacing with like Steph Curry and KD and Larry Bird, I'd take Greg Popovich. Yeah, I think that would be a good one. He could execute this offense. I mean, the 2014 Spurs. Yeah, they played some of the most beautiful basketball I've ever seen. I mean, just as far as how they executed, making the extra pass, spreading the floor, being unselfish, which you have to be unselfish. There's a lot of egos that's at play here. Making that extra pass would be crucial going up against that Lakers defense and all that length. So yeah, I'd probably run Greg Popovich out there.
Who do you think's an all-time better coach between the two, Phil and Pop?
I've always leaned towards Phil. Maybe my bias is playing in there a little bit. People want to say that like Phil Jackson only won his championships, because he had great talent. But to me, it's like everybody needs great talent to win championships. But as far as like executing with that talent, I don't think there's anybody better than Phil Jackson. I was actually really happy with the Last Dance documentary, because I felt like what it did was really put respect back on Phil Jackson's name, because he's just had a lot of things going on recently. He's a great coach, not a great general manager. He wasn't great with the Knicks, so a lot of people just lost respect for him there. And then he had even some weird stuff going on with LeBron James, where he said LeBron James and his posse, and LeBron took offense to that. And so he's just been kind of painted in this bad light lately. and people really don't like if you talk to people who were coached under him, like Michael and Scotty and Shaq and Kobe. They all saw Phil Jackson as a genius, like a guy who just managed egos, who spoke with so much wisdom, who did things out of the box. I mean, he would do stuff that where like you would see the team struggling, and 99% of NBA coaches would have like called a timeout at that moment. But Phil Jackson knew like when this was a situation where the guys just got to figure it out. They got to figure it out. I got to let them ride this wave because they need to know how to handle these pressure situations where stuff seems like it's falling apart for when the playoffs come around. And I remember watching it, I like pulled my hair, but you just see that composure and that maturity and the execution and those sort of things come out in the playoffs. And plus, I mean, Michael Jordan, Scotty, Kobe, Shaq, they all had years where they were great, where they were like considered prime years, but they didn't have Phil Jackson, and they didn't win much. I think I did the math before, but off the top of my head, if you combine Jordan, Pippen, Shaq, and Kobe, off the top of my head, under Phil Jackson, they have over 20 rings. Not under Phil Jackson, those four players combined have one ring, just one, and they played like an equal amount of seasons under Phil Jackson and not under Phil Jackson. So again, I can go on and on praising Greg Popovich too, but I just feel like at the end of the day, if you've got 11 championship rings, more than twice as much as the other guy, like, sorry.
And I think that's the thing with Philly. You raised a really good point. Like the whole time with the Knicks really hurt him, but dude, we've talked about this quite a bit off air, just in our own conversations. But there is a real Laker tax, and what I mean by that is that a player that if he wasn't with the Lakers, or if he wasn't with the Lakers organization anyway, he would be considered more revered. But because he's associated with the Lakers, and because there's so many people that hate the Lakers, he's diminished. Phil Jackson, I think, is the greatest coach in all of sports history. I mean, the guy won 11 rings in 20 years. I mean, and he went to the finals another 2 times during that span too. And he took some time off during that time too. Like, this dude's coaching legacy is just absolutely impeccable. I mean, how are you going to argue with a record of 11-2 in 20 years? Like, I mean, just truly just dominant and just creative. And I mean, and the same people that say, so it's like, oh, well, he had all these players. Those are the same people that would claim that Duncan is better than Kobe and Shaq. And it's not like Popovich had like horrible talent. I mean, he had quite a bit of good talent too. And I don't know. I mean, you look at the Spurs, it's like probably historically the best Spurs team that ever existed under Popovich. If we're talking about in terms of, like all of like the advanced metrics and even just record wise, was the 2015-2016 Spurs team. And what happened that year? That year there was other great teams and they didn't even get past the second round. Like, I feel like a lot of the years where the Spurs won titles, it was years where there really was either like they were in between great eras of teams, So even like that 14 Spurs team, it's like they kind of snuck in where it was like the Miami Heat weren't really that good that year and the Warriors hadn't really arrived yet and they won a title that year. Or, you look at them in 2007, that was in between Laker domination. And 2003, same thing. The Lakers were fatigued. And 99 before the Lakers. And I don't know, man. I think Popovich is a good coach. But, all-time great coach. But, like, I mean, yeah, I just feel like if anyone wants to make an argument for him over Phil Jackson, I feel like that's just pure, you just don't like the Lakers. And that's cool. I mean, I like I said, I mean, you can have whatever argument you want to have, but I mean, this dude turned the Bulls into like the prolonged greatest team in modern era. People want to say, oh, well, the 2016 Warriors, they won more games than the Bulls. Another thing to remember for that Bulls, the era with Phil Jackson with the Bulls, is like, it's not like they had one season where they had 72 wins, and then the next season after that, they had like 56. Because something like that did happen with the Warriors, right? Because what they have in 2017, then they have a record of like 65 or 66 wins. And then the year after that, they had like in the high 50s. Like, they definitely diminished But I mean, for the Bulls, I mean, didn't they have what? Didn't they have like a 69 win season and then a 68 win season? I mean, they had some like very high winning seasons on top of the 72 win season, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. They actually, a lot of people don't know this, but they went 72 and 10 in 1996, and the very next year in 1997, they almost won 70 games in back-to-back years. They won 69, but they actually lost the last game of the regular season in 1997 on a game-winning shot. I think it was against the Bullets or I'm not sure which team it was against, but they lost on a last-second shot, and that shot hadn't fallen for the opposing team. It would have been back-to-back 70-win seasons. Like, that's a crazy aspect that nobody ever talks about.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, people again, they want to, they want to poke holes in the Bulls, and they're like, oh, well, blah blah blah, and besides Jordan, there was no other historical great players. I mean, I feel like that's almost, you could make an argument that even makes it more impressive what the Bulls accomplished with Phil. That like the third best player on that team was Dennis Rodman, a guy that like had very little offensive game in his repertoire. I mean, what Phil accomplished between the Bulls and Lakers truly was remarkable. And I know we're kind of getting a little off base because, originally we're talking about the teams, but let's talk a little bit about the benches. So would you mind going over your bench again real quick?
Yeah. So, again, I could have put in any five, but I think we're just doing backups at each position. So I got Isaiah Thomas backing up. I'm moving Scottie Pippen to the shooting guard position, which isn't his natural position, but, you got their wings, they're interchangeable. So Isaiah Thomas, Scottie Pippen, Kevin Durant at the 3, Charles Barkley at the 4, Tim Duncan at the 5. Tim Duncan, they call him the greatest power forward of all time. A lot of people view him as a center. He played large portions of his career at both positions. Some people think he just started at power forward just because David Robinson was already at the center. So, I mean, I feel comfortable having Tim at either position. So moving him to the center so Charles Barkley can shine at the 4. So, yeah, I like that second unit. And then your second unit again?
So I got Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, James Worthy, Pau Gasol, and Kareem. So, I mean, I know between West, Baylor, and Worthy, it's kind of, I guess, I guess it's kind of, a little bit debatable exactly who's the, point guard, shooting guard, and small forward. But, yeah, well, I guess Jerry West would be the point guard. But how do you think that matchup would go? I guess if you want to start off with Jerry West against Isaiah Thomas.
Jerry West and Isaiah Thomas would be really exciting. Similar styles in the sense to where they both can make plays, they both can score. They're both kind of, I guess, dual threat point guards where they can either facilitate or score. Like, both guys were good at that. They both play transition basketball. The year that Jerry West won the championship, he was pushing the tempo for the Lakers, playing a lot of the point guard position. So that'd be a good matchup. I think Isaiah Thomas is like 6'1" tall, and Jerry West is listed at like 6. He's listed like 6'3" or 6'4", but I've heard that he's even smaller than that. So I don't know. The official listings are always not that accurate, so not that official. But yeah, I think that'd be an excellent matchup. Where I feel good is my wings with Scottie Pippen and Kevin Durant. I mean, I'm putting the clamps on people with those two. Like, that's a lot of length. That's a lot of tenaciousness because people forget. Like, I actually looked when I knew I was going to talk about this to see if Kevin Durant made an all-defense team in 2017, and I was shocked he didn't, that he wasn't on the list, because he was defensively he was a beast that year. And I remember they were running some of their death lineups, like their really small ball lineup, and they had Kevin Durant basically running as their main rim protector when they were doing that, and he was holding it down. And so, yeah, if I've got 2017 Golden State Warriors Kevin Durant, he's going to cause all kinds of problems defensively.
Well, how high do you rank like prime Elgin Baylor, and like do you think his game is very translatable to like the modern day NBA?
It's tough to say. He's a really difficult one to think about, like how his game would translate. Because he's about 6'5", and he could score with the best of them. But when him and Jerry West were on a team, Chick Hearn gave him a nickname where Elgin was Mr. Inside and Jerry West was Mr. Outside. And the league was a little bit shorter at that time, and trying to dominate with interior scoring as a 6'5" guy I feel like could be a little bit more difficult for Elgin at this time. Especially considering, with my team that he's going up against, with the NBA team. I say my team, I would be rooting for the Lakers, obviously, but with this team that I picked, I feel like he might have a hard time with that, to be honest. But he works well with Jerry West. They did really well together, and at one point Elgin was averaging 38 points a game. So man, I don't know. He might he might.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Writer Junkie. Are you thinking about starting a business or a side hustle? Writer Junkie offers website development, content writing, and SEO services for businesses. Call Writer Junkie today at 805-587-7966, and you can visit them online at writerjunkie.com. We'd also like to thank the Tax Defense Group for being a sponsor. Well, who do you feel most confident about for the NBA team on the bench, and who do you feel most confident about for the Lakers on the bench?
Most comfortable with, I feel comfortable with Isaiah, Scotty, Durant, Charles Barkley, Tim Duncan. But I mean, I feel like there's one specific guy who's going to cause all kinds of problems off my bench. I know it sounds weird because they're all great, but I mean, Kevin Durant. Durant could play in any era. He's borderline 7 feet tall. He can shoot from 30 feet accurately. You give him any space and he's knocking it down. And he's already shown that, if you put him on a team full of all-stars, it just makes him even better. When he went from Oklahoma City to Golden State, his efficiency skyrocketed, and he was shooting well over 50% at that point, and right around 40% from 3-point range. So he would be lethal with this team, especially with Charles Barkley and Tim Duncan causing problems down low, being able to kick it out to KD. I think he would really stand out in this matchup, and I feel he put up a lot of points for sure.
No, I agree with you. I think that Durant, in a weird way, again, looking at it, it's you could certainly make an argument, and probably most people would, that Duncan is most people would rank Duncan higher than Durant, but I'll actually be honest with you, if I was building a team today, right now, and I had the first 10 years of Duncan, so I had Duncan from 20 to 30, or I had Durant 20 to 30. I would rather have Durant's 20 to 30, all things being equal. But I would view Durant as a threat, and I think the best player off the Lakers bench would be Kareem, because this would be prime Kareem. Whatever year you want to take is the best year of Kareem as a Laker. Obviously, Duncan would be on him, but I don't know, man. I don't. How well do you think Duncan would match up against Kareem?
Duncan's an amazing defender. 15 all-defense team, but when you're up against Kareem and a skyhook, and you're talking prime Kareem, which is probably 1971, 1972 Kareem with Milwaukee, or maybe 75 with the Lakers. I guess we have to go by Lakers here. So yeah, 1975 with the Lakers is what you're going with. Yeah, dude, no one's stopping that skyhook. The only guy I've ever seen able to contest the skyhook or even block it is Wilt Chamberlain, and he's a Laker, so that doesn't work. And Duncan's not necessarily got the highest elevation. He's not necessarily the quickest center. So despite how great he is defensively, I see that all kinds of problems. That was probably your most controversial pick, was putting Shaq in the starting lineup ahead of Kareem. You went for the Kobe Shaq combo instead of the Magic Johnson Kareem combo. So that one might be seen as a little bit controversial, but I think Magic would make Shaq. It would make Shaq even better, so I can't fault it by any means.
I think a part of the reason why I did that too is because with the lineup, at least the Laker lineup that I have, with the exception of Magic, it's very modern players. All of these players have all played within the last 10 years. Because when did Shaq retire? Was that 2012, right? So like, it was 2012, right? Was it 2010?
When Shaq last played? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
It was right around then. It was like 2009, 2010, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
no, because he was with the Celtics. Yeah, he was with the Celtics after the Celtics lost to the Lakers again. So it must have actually been like 2011 or something like that. Yeah.
yes. So I mean, there's a number of players that are still in the league that like played against Shaq. Like I mean, you could find footage of, James Harden playing games against Shaq. So like, I feel like with that it's a lot more modern, and I feel like that's one thing that is hard for some of these players. So like we talked about Elgin Baylor. It's like, well, I mean, Elgin Baylor hasn't almost played a game of basketball in 50 years. I mean, right? In the video that you did recently on your own channel with the Lakers that won the 72 title, like, I mean, he retired midway through that season. So the last game he played was in 1971. I mean, the last time Elgin Baylor played a game of basketball is old enough to be our father.
Yep.
I mean, like literally. And I mean, that's kind of what makes it a little hard. Like, we talked about this earlier. You alluded to it's like, well, how does he translate into the modern era? I mean, when it's such a different sport back then, and even too, even players like George Mikan. I mean, it's hard to say, especially like somebody like him, where, I mean, he hasn't played since before my parents were born. It's really hard to say, oh, how good this guy was, especially trying to translate to the modern era. But yeah, I guess on the bench, I mean, the only player that I have that is like a modern player would be Gasol, but that was kind of before Gasol kind of added in more shooting into his game, though.
Right.
So that would have made it a little tough. I mean, how do you think Gasol would have matched up against Barkley?
Yeah. That's kind of a weird one because two very contrasting styles. As Gasol's 7 feet tall, Charles Barkley is listed as 6'6", but people think it's actually closer to 6'4", because you see him and Michael Jordan. Michael's listed as 6'6". I mean, standing next to each other, he's got like an inch or two on Chuck. And so size-wise, it's Pau Gasol. He's going to take Charles to the post and just drop in little hook shots around him and stuff. Now, Chuck's strong build, big weight, center of gravity. He'll definitely try to keep him from getting too close to the basket. But Charles, I mean, I think if I'm taking Charles from any era, I'm thinking like 1990 or 1989 with the Philadelphia 76ers when he was cut and when he could run that fast break and such. Like that Charles Barkley in transition, like, oof, that's kind of a tough matchup with Powell if they want to run the ball at all. And I feel like with Isaiah Thomas, he could definitely do that. I like that. I like Zeke and Chuck on the team running that transition together. But again, I feel like both players have their own kind of unique offensive advantages on either side of the court. Something else that I was thinking about the two teams, between like the bench, the starting lineups, and the coaches, this would be a huge contrast in styles. It's not just that you're having going against each other, but it's how they would play. Because with this Lakers team, with Shaq in the middle, with Kobe, they're going to try to run some triangle. And how I like running the triangle. It's not going to be the Pat Riley Showtime Lakers maybe transition as much if Phil Jackson's trying to do that. And with, the Greg Popovich all-time NBA team, they're going to be doing a lot more spacing. I actually like, even though I have some old school players, I like the way the All-NBA team kind of fits in a modern style of basketball, because you got Steph Curry spacing the floor. He can kind of facilitate, and he'll be running around, like Reggie Miller, Steph Curry style, where he's just looking for his shot. Michael Jordan will just live in the post. He can handle the ball up top too if he needs, because they're probably taking like 92 MJ. And then Larry Bird's on the perimeter too. So you've got tons of spacing there. And then Kevin Durant and Scottie Pippen can shoot the 3 too coming off the bench. So I think we're really going to be spacing out and doing some modern style of basketball under Greg Popovich. So that versus the triangle, that would be a unique kind of a unique matchup there.
Well, another match like idea too is like even like the passing for the Lakers. I mean, especially when you make substitutions. I mean, can you imagine, Magic and LeBron, especially like if you were to take, so you had the LeBron of either last year or this year. I mean, Could you imagine LeBron and Magic? I mean, the passes that would go on between the two of them.
Yeah.
And then, especially too, make a substitution. I mean, could you imagine you throw in, like, if you had all three of Jerry West, Magic, and LeBron potentially? Like, I don't know, man. The passing, yeah. I mean, especially even just Magic. I mean, with this is starting lineup, I mean, that passing would just be just tremendous, dude. I mean, potentially two of the greatest passers, at least two out of the five greatest passes ever on the court at one time together. And they're bigger and stronger than, like, most of the competition in their same position. Like,
Sure.
you're right. It would be a total contrast, though. Of You're right, like, because your team, it is a lot more shooting for sure, and it is a lot more, like you could say, definitely like modern, and especially if you substitute it out. Let's say you put Hakeem back at center, and then you move Durant into with the starters. I mean, dude, that would be a heck of a lot of shooting if you had Curry, Durant, Jordan, and Bird on the court at once together. Like, that would be a heck of a lot of shooting. So I mean, yeah, that is you raise a really good point with that. It would be totally different styles. So I guess now that we've gone on so long, so if you had to put your money on it in a 7-game series, who do you got?
Thinking about how they match up again. Man, it's so hard. I think it's going 7 games. I think it's a 7-game series, and I think the All NBA team wins. I honestly do, and I think the biggest reason is starting lineups. I like the aspect of the shooting and everything. I like the way they match up. They obviously have the greatest player of all time, Michael Jordan, in my opinion, and then. I think that second unit just really works well together too. Defensively, they're really sound. I like the bench a little bit more, especially considering you have a lot of modern players. I feel like with the Lakers, just a little bit more question marks, like how's Baylor going to match up? Even Jerry West is going to have to adjust a little bit to the 3-point line, although he might enjoy it. And Pau Gasol, I feel like, he's not quite a prime Charles Barkley. He might have a tough time keeping up with Shaq because Shaq was fast. And so I just think that the All NBA team's a little bit deeper. And maybe the starters get the edge for the Lakers, but when that second unit comes in, I feel like that's when the All NBA team could really separate themselves. What do you think?
See, I mean, I agree that I think that the NBA team has the better bench. But man, I mean, I'm just thinking, dude, just like the combination of like Kobe and LeBron and mixed with Shaq, dude, it's just in my mind, I'm just thinking like, dude, if you had a game where like, if they wanted to do like, hack a Shaq, so let's say you take him out, dude, I'm just thinking the combo, man, of LeBron and Kobe, like, I don't know. I just seriously don't know who on earth on the NBA team is going to stop LeBron when he just is just going nuts, dude. I just don't. I mean, I don't think there's enough strength on that side. I mean, like Bird isn't going to stop LeBron. I mean, LeBron in all reality is probably stronger and heavier than Hakeem and Russell. Like, I don't know, dude. Like, I just think about like the two of them. I mean, that would have been an all-time. If only Kobe and LeBron could have played together at the same team at the same time. Like, I mean, there probably would have been a lot of drama and maybe it would have exploded, but
I mean, they did on USA. I mean, I know it's a USA team and there's a lot of talent, but that's what we're talking about. We're talking about all-time this year. And they were scary. 08, 2012, they were scary. You know what I like about the Lakers team too? Real quick, is if the kind of play that I think Magic and LeBron would do together, and I keep making the mistake of saying like 2013 LeBron. No, we're sticking to Lakers, so it'd have to be 2020 LeBron, which again, any version of LeBron's a good one. But
yeah, at least as of yet, there hasn't been one really bad year, even last year. I mean, if he hadn't gotten injured, he probably would have made it like the first All-NBA team.
Yeah, but he's still like running the fast break. as good as anybody. He's 35, but he doesn't look 35. The only thing that looks 35 is his beard. Actually, his beard looks 55. But
yeah, his body's 20. He looks like a 25-year-old freight train.
Yeah.
A 55-year-old. And that's the thing about LeBron. This current one is this. I mean, dude, like, if I told you he was stronger than Hakeem and Russell and he weighed more than both of them, like, would that surprise you?
I don't think well, it might surprise me a little bit, but I mean, he's close. I don't know, actually. I don't know what Hakeem weighs. I'd have to look into that because Hakeem's a lot taller, but he's slimmer for sure. I mean, when you talk about mass, LeBron's built. He's built like a train.
Yeah.
But the comparison I wanted to make is, did you watch much of the Redeem Team for the 2008 Summer Olympics?
I didn't.
Yeah, I loved those games, man, and that was one of the greatest Olympic teams ever. But one combo that, if you want to look up highlights and just see how meshed together, was Jason Kidd and LeBron James. When they were on the floor together, that was exciting because Jason Kidd's court vision and the passes he was making, and when LeBron is like the perfect slasher for a point guard like Jason Kidd. And there was rumors for a while that the Cavs were trying to make a deal that would have landed Jason Kidd on Cleveland. And oh my gosh, they would have been in the finals several years if that had happened. But Magic Johnson's just Jason Kidd on steroids.
Yeah.
But you put him with LeBron James, yeah, that would be exciting. But again, you have your guys that you're looking at, Magic, Kobe, LeBron, Shaq. I'm looking at Jordan, Bird, Hakeem Olajuwon, Bill Russell. I mean, dude, I've got 25 championship rings in my starting lineup. You know, so I don't think it's any cakewalk. I don't think there's many exploits. You know, Magic might have the only clear advantage, but you know, because Kobe's not, you know, gonna really take advantage of MJ. Larry might have, you know, a little bit of a hard time with 35-year-old LeBron, but Larry was an underrated defender. Like, people don't give him enough credit. He made some all-defense teams, and he was smart, and he had IQ. And if LeBron's able to get past Larry on the perimeter, there's Hakeem Olajuwon or Bill Russell are going to be able to help. You know, so yeah, it's tough to say.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with this, I mean, there's definitely, I mean, it's really, you know, there are really no wrong answers in my opinion. I mean, I feel like with the all-time Lakers team, I mean, it's a lot less negotiable who would be on the team. Because, I mean, we kind of talked about this before, too, before we started talking. Like, you could even do, like, if you wanted to do the all-modern team, if you wanted to change it to something like, you know, like Michael, and then let's say if you wanted to keep Curry, but then you wanted to throw in, I mean, I guess you have Durant too, but, you know, even like more like if you open it up to like just kind of the modern type of guys, like, you know, your Giannis and Harden and Kawhi and Luka and all that stuff. Or I guess not, Luka's too early, but you know, those kind of dudes, like, I guess you kind of allude to this idea of like comparing modern players versus older players, and it's just so hard. I mean, I know you did a video about this recently about the 80s and the play of the 80s, and you know, in my mind, I'm always going to have a little bit of a bent where I just kind of lean towards that the average player today is better than the average player in like of yesteryear. Like, especially when we get so far back, like especially like the 80s, where it's like there's only some players that have played against players who played against players in the 80s. I mean, it's like, you know what I mean? It's so far removed at this point. Like, even like Vince Carter would probably be the only guy that played against players who played in the 80s, right? It's like when Vince Carter came into the league, there's probably, yeah, there were still some players left that were drafted in the 80s, but yeah, that's so far removed though. But yeah, man, I don't know. I mean,
real quick. How far does that go though? Because if I say, like, take JaVale McGee,
yeah,
and take JaVale McGee and drop him in the 1960s, is he like right there with like Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain in your mind? I'm not going to criticize you for it. I'm honestly just asking, because some say like, take this player, drop him back then, and he's one of the best players in the league. Do you think it's that, like, to that extent?
I don't think it's to that extent, but I mean, again, I mean, this might be a little bit of my own ignorance. I haven't really watched a ton of '60s basketball, but I would say a player like McGee. Let's say if you ranked him as, I don't know, probably most people would rank him towards the bottom seven best centers in the starting centers in the NBA. I don't know, maybe you would even say the bottom three. I'm trying to think of. I'd have to look at every roster to see who their center is to say where does McGee rank compared to them. But so let's say if he was bottom three in the NBA today in terms of starters, I kind of feel like he would probably be like a top 10 center in the 60s. I kind of err kind of more in that direction. Like I wouldn't say that McGee would be the third best center in 1966, for example.
Sure, sure.
But again, I mean, I'd have to really kind of think about that a little bit. I just feel like they would be a little better in the past, though.
Yeah, I can see that, and I even agree with that to a certain extent. But I mean, like, because you did have some great centers back then, other than Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain, some bigs that really don't get enough shine, like Nate Thurmond, Walt Bellamy, Bob Pettit was a great power forward. And so you had, some great players back then that don't get enough shine. But at the same time, I think I do generally agree that, a player like, a modern day center, you take him back, he's going to be a little bit better than. But the other thing is, like, at that time, there was only like 10 teams in the league. And so there was years where Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell had to play each other 18 times. They had to play 18 times in a season. Like, that's insane. And I think that's the other part that, like, people miss is, like, the rivalries were intense. Like, and getting to play against each other that many times, like, that means you're playing against, if he's, like, your equal and he's the best defensive big man in the league, you have to play against that guy 18 times. And so that's another thing you got to factor in when you're thinking about the level of competition. It's like, Shaq and Hakeem Olajuwon, if it was interconference, they played each other 4 times. If it was out of conference, they played each other twice, but 18 times, like that's 18 rough nights for those two centers.
Well, and this also goes to something that you raised actually in that, and I don't mean to completely plug your videos, but in your 80s video, you raised a really good point where when there was less teams in the NBA, you had high concentration of great players on certain teams. And I do feel like, and this is a totally different subject matter, but the fact that, in my opinion, I think that there's too many teams right now in the NBA. I think that it's been watered down because, I mean, you can almost look at every team in the NBA and at least point out one player that is either you would consider a star or a player where you're like, oh, that guy has a lot of potential in him. But because they're scattered amongst 30 franchise, you get guys like, let's say, your Devin Bookers or Bradley Beals. Like, if you just got rid of the Suns and the Wizards and you had to put those two players, let's say one of them went to, I mean, I guess, it would be the rich getting richer, but let's say you put one on the Bucks and one on the Lakers, for example, today, like, look how much, like, it would bolster those two teams, obviously, but, like, I feel like a lot of stuff was happening in the past where, like, you look at, like, the 80s, especially, like, Lakers and Celtics, there was just a large concentration of really good players on both of those teams. And, with the Pistons and the 76ers, like, they just had a lot of concentration. And, like, just historically, the Lakers have really benefited from having, especially, like, pre-2000, so I guess 80s and 70s and 60s, like, just a large concentration of, like, really good players. And you kind of raised the specter in that video. We're talking about, like, these super teams that existed back then kind of were more prevalent than they are now. And I think part of it is just because there was just less teams to spread them out amongst.
Sure. I actually really like that point. Now I'm getting this, like, it's breaking off in all kinds of branches in my head, because if you did that, which it'd be impossible at this point to eliminate several teams. I mean, if they could pull it off, it'd be really interesting. But to have that many teams losing, that many cities losing their teams would suck for a lot of fan bases. But if they were able to do it, the talent pool is more concentrated and the competition level. But I called the 80s the era of super teams. Now, natural super teams is what I call them, because you see, like, the big three Miami Heat, that was player orchestrated, free agency, like everybody kind of they manufactured a team, which you can use as a criticism or you could, praise them for it. It's just them exercising their rights, their player mobility. But in the 80s, like a lot of times it was trades, it was draft, it was the GMs putting these teams together. But there was a lot of super teams. But one thing you never saw in the 80s was nobody complained about there being super teams. Nobody said this isn't fair. It isn't fair that the Lakers have so much talent. It isn't fair that the Celtics have so much talent. Like, nobody complained about that because there was a lot of talent on all the teams, or on a lot of the teams, I should put it that way. Because, you couldn't complain about worthy Kareem and Magic being on the Lakers when you have Bird, McHale, and Parrish. And then the Pistons have got Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Dennis Rodman, Lambeer, and Adrian Dantley, or switch them out for Mark Aguirre. Like, dude, that's a solid team. And then you look at the Sixers, who either had, Moses Malone, Dr. J, and Maurice Cheeks. And then when Moses is out, you added Charles Barkley to that. Now you got Charles Barkley and a little bit of an older Dr. J and Maurice Cheeks. And Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, like anybody who had 2 stars, sorry, it's not enough. Like, you need a third. And so, but you didn't hear people complaining about that just because there was less teams and there was lots of teams with a lot of talent, So yeah, that raises a really interesting point. I think that could fix some of the whole super team negative stigma in the NBA right now if they tried it that way.
Yeah, and right now, you look at the NBA, and I kind of feel like, in all honesty, again, this don't want to go too far down a rabbit trail because it's so different than the topic actually at hand, but I kind of feel like right now, the season that we're living in right now, this is probably the most diluted in terms of talent spread across the league, almost in a bad way. There's too much talent spread across the league where I feel like the teams... there's no super team that exists, and no team has more than 2 legitimate stars on it. And I don't know. I kind of feel like I don't know if that's necessarily the best product. I don't know. We talked about this before off air, but in my mind, in an alternate universe, if you could have had the 2020 playoffs feature something where it was a team of LeBron, Davis, and let's say Kawhi signed with the Lakers, that 3-headed monster versus a totally healthy Golden State of the team of last year, let's say Durant stayed with Golden State and Clay never got injured. In my mind, that would have been a historical, oh my gosh, look at this lineup, this 3-headed Lakers monster versus this, the big 4 of the Warriors clashing. I feel like that would have been really historical. Whereas I feel like you look at the Lakers versus the Clippers potentially this year in the Western Conference Finals. It'll be cool. The Lakers versus Clippers, that'll be cool. But, there's a lot less, I don't know, in my mind, it's a lot less marquee names, It's Paul George and Kawhi versus LeBron and Davis. It's that's really cool. It's really interesting. But, I don't know. In my mind, it doesn't hold the same luster as that other matchup,
Yeah, but it makes the playoffs leading up to it boring. 2017 was the most boring playoffs I've ever seen. And the sad thing was I was seeing some of the best basketball. From a pure basketball standpoint, it was some of the best basketball I've ever seen from the Golden State Warriors. The way they executed, there was 3. I was kind of putting together some notes for my GOAT team series for the Warriors, and there's so much there from a pure basketball standpoint. But they had 3 games in the playoffs where they had set a record for the fewest turnovers in a playoff game, which was 7 turnovers. 3 playoff games, they only had 7 turnovers. They did that 3 times. And
on top of that, even that year, something else to remember is that the Cavs, I believe that the Cavs only lost, did they only lose 1 game en route to the finals?
Yeah.
And the Warriors lost 0, right?
Right, correct.
So between the 2 teams, they went through their conference having combined lost 1 game or something like that. I do remember that clearly. I'm oh my gosh. I'm again, that would have been interesting. That 2017 Cavs team is probably better than the 16 Cavs team. But because of Durant, obviously they lost in 5. But
that's why I like your idea. Is if you cut out some of those teams, you enrich the the level of talent across the league.
That's the thing about LeBron. This current
undefeated teams. And so now you've got, more stars and marquee names on each team, but at the same time, the level of parity and competition is still there as well. I think that's what made the 80s really so fascinating is, if any one of those teams, whether it be the Sixers, the Lakers, the Pistons, the Celtics, like all those teams were capable of being dynasties. I even think the Bulls of the 80s were capable of being NBA champions, but you were just in the era of super teams. It was so hard to break through and win championships. But yeah, there was just so much power at the top of the conference that seeing all of these Hall of Famers duking it out each year in the playoffs, it made for some great television.
Well, then another issue that kind of exists even today, like when you form these unnatural super teams, I mean, you kind of end up with a situation where it's like, yeah, you might have like 3 really good players, but if you have 3 really good players and you've, traded for 2 of them, however, you got them in free agency, it ends up resulting in you have 0 bench. So it's kind of like, let's say there's even a big 3 formed next summer and, you had some big 3 of, let's just say, hypothetically, Giannis, Jimmy Butler, and Victor Oladipo on the Heat, right? I mean, if you did that, that's almost your entire cap right there. I mean, maybe you do some wizardry to keep, like, Bam, but, like, after that, like, how are you going to afford everybody else? That's your whole cap spaces right there, right? Like, I don't know. Yeah, again, that's, I guess, a little bit of a diatribe, but I will say, I think we can both agree to this, that there's probably only one team in NBA history that has anywhere near the kind of breadth of talent that the Lakers have, which would be the Celtics. And I would for sure take the all-time Laker team and their bench versus the all-time Celtics bench. I don't think there's any team in the NBA that even comes really close to stacking up to just the raw amount of talent that the Lakers have seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why we should do Lakers versus all NBA. To me, that's the only way maybe the only way it becomes fair. Because Celtics, I mean, just off the top of my head, running at point guard, you have like a Bob Cousy, Hondo, or I'm not sure who you'd have, but you also got you got Larry Bird, Ray Allen. I mean, the shooting on this team is potentially insane. Probably Kevin Garnett or Kevin McHale, one of the Kevins at power forward, right? Bill Russell, coming off the bench, you're going to have guys like Sam Jones and Paul Pierce. Again, a great team, but it's not Kobe, Magic, LeBron, Shaq. Dude. I think maybe if you combine the Celtics and the Bulls franchise, okay, now we got a conversation. Like you'd have to have like the Celtics and Bulls like join forces to take out the Lakers. That's what you need. Because if you combine like throw Jordan and Pippen and MVP Derrick Rose in there and Artis Gilmore maybe to come off the bench, then that becomes interesting. But
yeah, I think in your all-time Celtic team, I think you're forgetting a certain player.
I know I am. I know there's certain players I'm forgetting.
No, I think it's a modern guy. I think it's Jason Tatum. I think that dude. I think he for sure would be on the all-time starting Celtic team.
Dude, we could do an entire podcast talking about the Jason Tatum hype. You bring it up every time. It just makes me happy.
Dude, the thing about it, and I've said it like a million times, dude, is that like it's not even like he's like a bad dude. It's just like, dude, he's the ultimate Rorschach in my mind when it comes to NBA players. Like, you hear like him talked about in the media, they're like, oh, he's the 3rd best player in the East, or I think I've even heard 2nd best player in the East. And then like you look and it's like, dude, he scored like 7 points and at 30% shooting. Like, who are they talking about? Are we looking at the same player? Like, he had a horrible game the other day. What game was it? Was definitely one of the games in the bubble. He scored under 10 points and it was like, what? This is your dude? Like, this is the guy that you think is like one of the best players in the whole NBA? Like, who are you talking about? He's probably a nice guy.
With you.
The breadth of talent that the Lakers have, I think, is only going to continue to expand. Like, I think over the next 10 years, so let's say by 2030, I think we could see some other really big names come here. I don't know for sure who. Like, I don't want to just be a dreamer and say, oh, we're getting all of the best players, but I would bet money that at least one player that today is considered a top 20 player for sure. I think we'll at least get one, if not two more top 20 players in the NBA right now, maybe even top 10, maybe even top 5. I don't know. Like, if you gave me a list of like the best players in the league, I feel like we'll at least get one or two of them. And I don't know how many other franchises could definitively say something like that.
Yeah, it's the power of the brand. I really, I was really laughing, man, because it's like when we were going through the rough patch, where it was like Kobe just tore his Achilles. We kind of overpaid him, to be honest. I know that sounds sacrilegious saying that we overpaid Kobe coming off an Achilles tear, but he was 35 years old coming off of like a career destroying injury, and we made him the highest paid player like in the NBA. And so that was like a bad contract. And then Timothy Mozgov and Luol Deng, and then, the Dwight Howard fiasco. And this whole time, we're missing on, oh, Dwayne Wade might join the team. Oh, LaMarcus Aldridge might join the team. Oh, DeMarcus Cousins might join the team. All these rumors all over the place. And everybody's just like, the Lakers franchise is dead. This is just, they're not coming back from that. And just that history, man, it's that brand. Eventually it's going to lure somebody back, because they're always in the talks. And for every swing and a miss they have, eventually they hit that crucial home run. And they got it with LeBron. They made it the trade for Anthony Davis. And after LeBron's gone, they'll find someone else. They might have a few misses beforehand, but they'll get somebody, because that's just the power of the brand, man. I mean, look at the history of the team. We literally just had a podcast where the greatest Laker team, one team, their all-time greatest lineup against all the other teams. Against
put together.
Or however many teams, because some franchises aren't still around, but all the other franchises. That's insane. That should tell you something. Like, history's telling you something. So yeah, I agree. It's just going to continue.
And I think for the Lakers too, I think some people say, oh, it's only LA or blah, blah, blah. It's like, again, maybe people don't necessarily want to hear this, but it's like, maybe like also the Lakers are like, maybe run a little bit better than the media makes it sound. Like, I'm not trying to necessarily carry water for Jim Buss or like Mitch Kupchak at the end, but like, they actually have done some good things. Like, actually, I don't know. I just look at it and say they have made historically good trades. And again, Mitch almost pulled off the trade for Chris Paul if the NBA hadn't, illegally blocked that. So, yeah, I don't know. I just feel like this whole notion, it's like, oh, the Lakers they're run crappily and blah, blah, blah and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, we've had some bad influences. Like, obviously, Jim Buss, that era was bad. And I don't necessarily think that Jeannie Buss is, like, the greatest owner. But I also think it's like, well, dude, the Lakers are kind of run by committee. Like, the largest individual owner of the team isn't even a single member of the Buss family. It's the owner of AEG, that Philip Outs guy or whatever. Like, he actually owns a larger percentage than any individual Buss family member does. And then obviously the guy that owns LA Times is also a big owner. So it's like, it's kind of spread around, amongst itself. And I don't know. Even like Rob Pelinka, the dude seems like a smart guy. He's a lawyer by training, and he was Durant's agent. He was Kobe's agent. Maybe this guy actually knows what he's doing. I know a lot of people think, oh, this guy's an idiot, or LeBron did everything, but I don't know, maybe God forbid he actually does know what he's doing. I don't know. I think it's a good combination of stuff. I think if you look historically at the Lakers too, there's been a lot of really talented people that have come in that aren't players. It's like truly remarkable. You look at obviously Phil Jackson, Pat Riley, Jerry West, Jerry Buss. Even like now it's like, Jason Kidd is being recruited to do this. And I'll say this for sure for Rob Pelinka. Like, if Rob Pelinka walked away from the Lakers today, I can guarantee you that he would get a job with another team, like, for sure within like a year and a half. Like, if something happened where him and Jeannie had a big blowout, he for sure would get hired somewhere else. And I think that definitely tells you something about how valuable he is.
Yeah, kind of a weird point, branch off of this, but just talking about the Lakers and how prestigious they are and how they are always recruiting talent, and that's just kind of their history and it's their continued history. It kind of makes me appreciate two guys more, and just really their greatness. Michael Jordan, for one, is the amount of success he had outside of the Lakers organization. Because you look at the greatest players of all time, Michael Jordan is basically the only one of the top scorers of all time. When you look at like the greatest scorers of all time, most of those guys put on a Lakers jersey or wore one, with LeBron James, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, even technically Karl Malone, Kobe Bryant, like Shaq scored a lot of points. So many of these guys, the all-time leaders, had all wore Laker jerseys. Magic Johnson's considered the greatest point guard of all time. And then, Jordan was able to do it completely outside of the Lakers. And even LeBron, even though he's put on the Lakers jersey, fairly recently, to do what he did for Cleveland was huge too, And so, I definitely think there's a Laker tax in the sense of how much credit or how much hate you get for certain things. But at the same time, with every, rough few years they get, or with every few years of missing the playoffs, usually success is quick to follow. It's when they're down, that little stretch they had in the 90s, that little stretch they had in the 20s usually doesn't last very long.
Yeah. And I think, you mentioned high scores, we can end on this note too. I'm not 100% ruling out that Kevin Durant doesn't come to Lakers one day. I mean, by the time he gets here, he won't be, obviously won't be in his prime, because I think he signed a 4-year contract with the Nets, and I think that would take him to about 35. So, I mean, I think his game could still probably really translate at 35, but I don't know. It would be nice to see Durant join the Lakers, just another, I mean, what do we have right now? 4 of the top 5 highest scorers ever are Lakers, right? Because 1 is Kareem, 2 is Karl Malone, 3 is LeBron, 4 is Kobe, and 5 is Michael. Yeah, so the top 4 highest scorers ever are all Lakers. So
yeah, which Karl you can barely count as a Laker, but we'll do it for this.
Yeah. I mean, he wore the purple and gold. I mean, you got to count it, right?
Yeah.
But
he was decent. He put up 20 points a game the year he did, so it's not like he didn't do anything. But
that's another very convenient fact that a lot of people overlook when they're like, "Oh, the 04 Lakers, they just got swept by Detroit and they were really crap." It's like, dude, didn't Karl Malone tear his Achilles like in game 1 of that series?
I'd have to look into what it is again. I thought it was knee problems, but it was definitely injuries kind of ruined that. That I don't want to take anything away from that 04 Pistons team, because that was just such a great defensive unit. They beat the Lakers by a squad, but there was a lot going on that year.
Karl Malone, didn't he go out in game 1 though, or game 2? Like, I mean, they probably still would have lost, but they wouldn't have been as bad if Malone hadn't gotten like injured right at the beginning of the series.
Yeah, it was also a weird year. I think there's this like really underrated YouTuber. I think it's what's his name? It's like Raul Presents Kobe, I think is the name of his YouTube channel, and it's just like all about Kobe. And he made this video talking about Kobe 2004 season, where a kind of a hard time for some of us Lakers fans to remember and talk about, where he's basically going through the Colorado trial, and he's having to travel back and forth between going to hearings in Colorado and then sometimes flying back and playing a game, the same day, literally just hours apart. And he's just like dead tired some of these games, and you can see it. And so there was a lot going on that year between the Colorado trial, all the injuries, the drama, and between, the beef between Shaq and Kobe, which again, that's how great Phil Jackson was. Dennis Rodman wants vacations. Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen have egos. They can't get along with Jerry Krause. Shaq and Kobe can't get along. There's drama. There's all this. I mean, dude still comes up with 11 championship rings out of it. That's crazy.
It's truly, just truly incredible, dude. Well, Jonny, thank you so much, man, for coming on and doing this, dude. I think, I think we had some fun with it.
Did you? What? I think you're picking the Lakers. How many games did you say? Did you say? You got to pick, dude.
Yeah, I'd probably say 6 or 7. I can't imagine it being less than. I don't know, man. I just
about that though, because I know from us talking ahead of time, it seems like you were kind of thinking it was going to be a really short series for the Lakers. So it sounds like I did a number on you. I convinced you a little bit otherwise.
Well, dude, the player that I think at the end of the day, it's just I think the guy on the other side, the guy that I'm most fearful of is Michael. Like, when you're playing against Michael, I just think that's just such an X factor. Like, I know like Hakeem and Russell they're both very good, and Bird obviously great, but dude, I'm just thinking Michael, man, and it's hard to root against a guy that did nothing but win. He was just so dominant and so good, and obviously Kobe is the most approximate person to that, but still, it's at the end of the day, you can absolutely trust Michael. Like, we know Curry's kind of disappeared in the finals, and Curry has kind of disappeared in the finals, and I know Kobe and Magic sometimes haven't played as good as they could play, but dude, Michael, you just know what you're getting, just getting a guy that's like just so incredible and just has like such a heart of a champion, and I trust him more than every other player on both teams in this situation, and that's why I'll always put Michael over LeBron, even though I think LeBron's 2016 finals was one of the greatest performances ever in the finals, especially like in the modern era. But like the only knock on that I would say is that I don't really think that Warriors team really had like a lot of heart. I think they had a lot of talent, but no one was like a ruthless killer with impeccable will. Like, if you put Michael on that 72 Warriors team, there's no way the Cavs are coming back down from 3-1,
Yeah, plus I don't think that 72 Warriors team was really at full strength either. They didn't have Andrew Bogut. Andrew Bogut got hurt. He wasn't able to finish the series. The Draymond Green suspension was kind of sketchy. It almost felt like at the time that Draymond Green suspension happened, that was like the NBA's way of extending the series. Because I believe it was 3-1 when they suspended Draymond. And it was like, really? Like, for that little like love tap below the belt, like you're gonna suspend him for that? Like, that's it didn't feel like that was worthy of a suspension of a game in the NBA Finals, but they extended the series with it. And then even Steph wasn't himself, because remember, he like hyperextended his knee, and he wasn't quite looking like he was 2016 unanimous MVP Steph. So again, although they beat the 73-9 Warriors, that wasn't the full strength 73-9 Warriors, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I don't know. I just remember Curry like in that series, like, he became like that big crybaby and threw the mouth guard into the audience, and like I just feel like if you had like this, especially like Michael and Bird, I guess that would be just these iron wills where it's just like I just trust them. I for sure trust Michael, and I very much trust Larry Bird.
Yep.
But like on the other side, dude, it's like I don't know, man. Dude, you got this guy Kobe. I know a lot of people, they love to crap all over how good he was as a player. And I'm sure that in 3 years from now, you and I are going to be texting, and there's going to be some all-time ranking where they're going to have Kobe as like the 25th best player ever. And we're just going to be like, dude, the disrespect is so insane towards this guy. But dude, this dude, man, they call him the Killer Mamba for nothing, dude. And, he was a great player and a killer. And I don't know. I guess I'm making an argument for both sides, and it's very unmeasurable to say someone is a killer and they have this iron will. How do you measure who has an iron will? It's like there's an iron will meter or something, but
well, it's true, because you made a good point with the Jordan thing, and that we can't quantify. Michael Jordan on the biggest stage always showed up, and Dom 2K had a great video where he talked about why Michael Jordan's his GOAT. Yeah. There's no example of him scoring only 8 points in the NBA Finals. There's no example of him getting outplayed by a role player. There's no example of him, trying to force a Finals MVP like Kobe did in 2004, and the team losing the championship series in 5 games. Like, almost every GOAT candidate has like a significant series where they just kind of laid an egg, And, you can talk about Jordan losing when his teams was far less talented, but there was never a time where he got on the biggest stage where he wasn't Michael. Even when he was 45, Jordan, they weren't on the biggest stage, and he was still adjusting from coming back with baseball. But that wasn't the finals. Like, that wasn't. We're talking about when it all mattered, and the whole world was watching every time Michael was Michael. So you can quantify that. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, and ultimately, I mean, I remember Skip Bayless. I think I forgot. This was back when he was on First Take. He did a video where it was his all-time starting lineup. And I think him and Stephen A. Smith were doing it. Stephen A. Smith, he has all these players, like a normal team, including Michael was on it. And Skip Bayless put a team that was like Michael Jordan, but then it was like Tiago Splitter and Slava Medvedenko and all these guys. And, Skip Bayless was like, it's like, I'm taking Michael Jeffrey Jordan because, and, he was the greatest of all time. And it doesn't matter who he's playing with because he's so good. And I mean, obviously, a team of Slava Medvedenko, I don't know how far you're getting with that, but just the fact that it's Michael, and again, I mean, maybe it's just the mystique of Michael, but that's always the thing about Michael that he'll have over other players is it's almost like the Babe Ruth aspect or like Muhammad Ali, where it's like you can pull up facts, you can pull up this or that, and you can say, well, what about this, what about that? But at the end of the day, those people have this mystique factor that's really unquantifiable, where you're just and you're like, dude, it's just, he's the dude. You're just not getting past him. I mean, it's almost like an Elvis Presley or something where you're just or Michael Jackson, you look at these all-time people and you're just like, dude, how do you surpass that? You know what I mean? It's just, I don't know. And I don't know. So on your side, I mean, that's why I wish Michael had come to the Lakers even for one season. It would have been cool to have the greatest player of all time for the Lakers, but I guess we'll just settle for 6 out of 10 of the top best players ever.
There you go.
I mean, literally on most top 10 lists, we have 60% of the top 10 players played for the Lakers. So
we're so spoiled. We need to acknowledge on this Lakers podcast, we completely understand this story.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, I know people would probably be so angry if Giannis came to Lakers and continued to win a bunch of stuff, but dude, I'd love it. I'd welcome it with open arms, man. I'm totally cool with just, being spoiled more, so.
Yeah. Good.
All right, Jonny. Well, definitely, man. Thank you so much for coming on, dude, and I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, sounds good. Look forward to the next one, bro.
All right, take care.